My name is Ranger Cassandra Torres, and I've been a law enforcement ranger with the National Park Service at Grand Canyon National Park for 16 years. Before that, I did 5 years with the Arizona Game and Fish Department as a wildlife officer, and 3 years with the Coconino County Search and Rescue Team. I've rappelled into slot canyons to extract injured hikers, recovered bodies from the Colorado River 4,000 feet below the rim, talked suicidal individuals back from the edge of cliffs, and worked missing persons cases that ended in ways I still have nightmares about. I tell you this so you understand that I'm not easily frightened. I don't panic in crisis situations. I don't see things that aren't there or jump to supernatural conclusions when there's a rational explanation available. Or at least, I didn't until September 8th, 2024. Before I tell you what happened in the area we call the Dragon Corridor, before I explain why I can no longer hike the South Kaibab Trail after sunset, and why I requested reassignment to the North Rim for reasons I couldn't put in my official transfer application, I need you to do something for me. If you're watching this video, if you follow these stories from rangers and officers who've encountered things they can't explain, please subscribe and like this video. What I'm about to share violates every confidentiality agreement I signed when I joined the National Park Service. But after what I witnessed, after what I became part of, silence feels like complicity. And I'm curious, where are you watching from right now? Have you ever visited the Grand Canyon? Have you ever stood at the rim at dawn or dusk and felt like the canyon was looking back at you? Like it was aware of your presence and measuring something about you that you couldn't identify? Drop a comment below. Tell me if you felt it too. Tell me if you've seen the lights. The Grand Canyon is one of those places that defies human scale. It's 277 miles long, up to 18 miles wide, and in places more than a mile deep. The Colorado River has been carving through rock layers for 6 million years, exposing geological history that goes back nearly 2 billion years. Over 6 million people visit the park every year, and most of them see the canyon from the developed overlooks along the south rim, take their pictures, and leave within a few hours, never really understanding what they're looking at. They see a big hole in the ground. They don't see the complexity, the vast network of side canyons and tributary drainages, the thousands of square miles of wilderness where no trails exist and no humans go, except the occasional extreme backcountry hiker with a permit and enough experience to survive. There are places in the Grand Canyon that have never been fully explored, rock formations that have never been climbed, side canyons that have never been mapped. The Havasupai people, whose ancestors have lived in and around the canyon for at least 800 years, have names for places in the deepest parts of the canyon that don't appear on any Park Service map. Names that translate roughly to where the spirits walk, or the forbidden place, or land that remembers the old ones. The Hopi people, whose traditional lands are just to the east, consider the canyon to be a sacred boundary, a place where their ancestors emerged into this world from the world below. And they have protocols about which areas can be entered and which must be avoided. The Navajo, the Paiute, the Zuni, all the indigenous peoples who have history with this landscape have similar warnings about specific locations. And for most of my career, I dismissed those warnings as cultural traditions that didn't have any bearing on my work as a law enforcement ranger. I was wrong. September 8th, 2024 started as a beautiful early fall day. I came on duty at 0600 hours for the morning shift, checked out my patrol vehicle, a modified 4X4 pickup with emergency response equipment, filled my water reservoir because even in September, the temperature at the rim can hit 80 degrees by afternoon, and headed out to patrol the South Rim area from Grand Canyon Village east to Desert View. My primary responsibilities that day were visitor contacts, checking permits for backcountry hikers, responding to any medical emergencies or search and rescue calls, and being a visible presence at the major overlooks where tourists sometimes get too close to the edge and need to be reminded that a fall from the rim is not survivable. The weather forecast called for clear skies, temperatures in the mid-70s, light winds, perfect conditions, a quiet day. I spent the morning hours doing routine patrols, helped a family from Germany who had gotten separated at Mather Point, wrote a citation for someone who had driven into a closed area, and responded to a medical call at Yavapai Point where an elderly man was having chest pains. By 1400 hours, I was finishing up my lunch at the ranger station when I got the call that would change everything. Dispatch reported that they'd received a distress call from a satellite messenger device, one of those emergency beacons that hikers carry in the backcountry. The coordinates placed the signal somewhere in the Dragon Corridor, about 3 miles below the South Rim, on a route that isn't an official trail, but is used by experienced canyoneers who know how to navigate difficult terrain. The message that came with the beacon activation was brief and confusing. It said, "Something wrong with time. Can't find the trail. They're watching us. Send help." The device belonged to a registered backcountry permit holder named Michael Chen, age 34, from San Francisco, who was on day 3 of a 4-day solo hiking trip through some of the most remote terrain in the park. I acknowledged the call and began assembling a response team. The Dragon Corridor is not a place you can reach quickly or easily. It's a complex system of side canyons and cliff bands that requires technical climbing skills to access, and even with the coordinates from the satellite beacon, finding someone in that terrain can take hours. I called for additional rangers, contacted our search and rescue coordinator, and started planning the fastest route down from the rim. But then, at 14:18 hours, we received a second transmission from the same device. This one said, "Never mind. Found it. Found what's been here. They want me to see. They want me to remember. Tell my sister I understand now." And then the device went silent. No response to our attempts to contact him. No further transmissions. Just silence. I made the decision to respond anyway. A confusing message followed by radio silence usually means the hiker is in trouble, possibly injured, possibly experiencing altitude sickness or heat exhaustion, possibly hallucinating from dehydration. I grabbed my technical rescue gear, loaded my pack with rope and medical supplies, and enough water for 2 people for 24 hours, and headed for the trailhead. The plan was to take the South Kaibab Trail down to Skeleton Point and then bushwhack west into the Dragon Corridor area, following the coordinates to find Michael Chen and assess his condition. 2 other rangers would follow an hour behind me as backup. I started down the trail at 14:45 hours. The South Kaibab Trail is one of the most spectacular and most dangerous trails in the park. It follows a ridgeline down from the South Rim with massive exposure on both sides, dropping 4,700 feet over 7 miles with no shade and no water. I'd hiked it hundreds of times, knew every switchback and every landmark, could navigate it in my sleep. The first 2 miles passed normally. I made good time, moving fast, focused on reaching the coordinates before dark. At Ooh-Ah Point, I stopped to check my GPS and radio in my position. That's when I noticed the first anomaly. My GPS was showing my location correctly, but it was also showing a second location marker, a ghost marker, about half a mile to the west in an area where I'd never been, an area that wasn't on any trail. The marker was pulsing, appearing and disappearing every few seconds, like my device couldn't decide where I actually was. I reset the GPS, figuring it was a glitch, some kind of satellite interference. The marker disappeared. I continued down the trail. At Skeleton Point, 3 miles below the rim, I left the main trail and started bushwhacking west toward the Dragon Corridor. This is where things get difficult. There's no maintained trail, just a network of game paths and used trails created by hikers over decades, winding through rock formations and around cliff bands, requiring careful navigation and constant attention to terrain. I'd been moving for about 20 minutes when I noticed that the light was wrong. The sun was in the western sky, where it should be at 1600 hours in early September, but the quality of the light was off. It wasn't the warm, golden light of late afternoon. It was cooler, bluer, like twilight light, even though sunset was still 3 hours away. And the shadows were falling at angles that didn't match the position of the sun. I stopped and checked my compass. It was spinning. Not wildly, not making full rotations, but moving back and forth through an arc of about 30 degrees, never settling on any direction, like there were multiple magnetic norths pulling at it simultaneously. I pulled out my radio to call this in to dispatch, to let them know I was experiencing equipment malfunction and might need to abort the response. The radio produced static. Not the normal static of a weak signal, but patterned static, rhythmic pulses that sounded almost like Morse code or like someone trying to speak in a language made of interference. I tried my cell phone. No signal. Not even the searching indicator. Just a blank screen where the signal bar should be. I was alone in a side canyon 3 miles below the Grand Canyon rim, with no communication and no reliable navigation equipment, trying to find a hiker who had sent increasingly strange messages about time being wrong and something watching him. Every part of my training said to turn around, to get back to the main trail, to call for better equipped backup once my radio started working again. But I had coordinates for Michael Chen's last known position, and I was only about half a mile from those coordinates, and there was a possibility he was injured and needed immediate help. I decided to continue for another 20 minutes, and if I didn't find him, or if conditions got worse, I would abort and return to the rim. I moved through the Dragon Corridor following my GPS toward the coordinates, and the landscape around me began to feel increasingly wrong. The rock formations were the right colors, the characteristic reds and oranges and creams of the various geological layers, but the shapes seemed off. The erosion patterns looked too regular, too geometric, like they'd been carved deliberately rather than formed by wind and water over millions of years. I started seeing symbols in the rock faces, patterns that looked like petroglyphs, but weren't in any style I recognized from the indigenous peoples who had lived in this region. They were more angular, more complex, forming designs that hurt to look at, that made my eyes water and my head ache when I tried to focus on them. And I started hearing sounds, not the normal sounds of the canyon, the wind moving through rock formations and the distant rush of the Colorado River. These were different. Humming, chanting, voices speaking in harmonics that seemed to resonate in my chest and skull. I stopped walking and listened, trying to identify where the sounds were coming from. They were coming from everywhere, from the rocks, from underground, from the air itself, and they were getting louder. I rounded a rock formation and entered a small amphitheater, a natural bowl maybe 100 feet across, surrounded by cliff walls on three sides. Michael Chen was standing in the center of the amphitheater. Standing, not sitting, or lying down, injured like I'd expected. Just standing there facing away from me, looking up at the cliff wall in front of him, completely motionless. I called out to him, identified myself as a park ranger, asked if he was okay. He didn't respond, didn't turn around, didn't even acknowledge that he'd heard me. I approached carefully, one hand on my radio even though it wasn't working, instincts telling me something was very wrong about this situation. As I got closer, I could see that Michael was holding his phone up, not like he was trying to get a signal, but like he was taking a picture or recording video. And I could see that there was something on the cliff wall that he was looking at. Not petroglyphs, not rock art, something else. The rock face was moving, not like it was falling or eroding, but like it was flowing, rippling like water, forming patterns and shapes and what looked almost like images. I stopped about 10 feet behind Michael and watched the cliff wall change. I saw shapes that might have been people, tall figures with elongated proportions, moving through landscapes that looked like the canyon but wrong, ancient versions of the canyon with different erosion patterns, different vegetation. I saw what looked like ceremonies or rituals, groups of figures arranged in geometric patterns around something I couldn't quite make out. And I saw text, or what looked like text, strings of symbols that appeared and flowed and disappeared, changing too fast for me to read or recognize. The humming I'd been hearing was louder now, and I realized it was coming from the cliff wall, from the flowing rock, a sound that felt like it was resonating at a frequency just below hearing, but that I could feel in every cell of my body. I reached out and touched Michael's shoulder. He turned to look at me, and I took 3 steps backward before I could stop myself. His eyes were wrong, not white like I'd heard about in other ranger reports, not rolled back or unfocused. His pupils were dilated so far that there was almost no iris visible, and they were reflecting light like an animal's eyes, throwing back the blue twilight glow with a red-orange sheen. And his skin had a translucent quality, like I could almost see through the surface layer to something underneath, something that looked like it was moving, flowing, like his entire body was in the process of transforming into something else. When he spoke, his voice sounded layered, multiple tones speaking simultaneously. "You can see it," he said. "I wasn't sure if anyone else could see it, but you're here. You're really here. That means it's not just in my head. That means it's real. All of it is real. The canyon remembers, Ranger. It remembers everything. Every person who's ever walked through here. Every civilization that's ever known this place. The Hopi weren't the first. The Havasupai weren't the first. There were others before them, much older. They built things here, not buildings, not monuments. They built something else, something that exists in multiple times, something that records, something that preserves, and it's still active, still recording, still preserving. I can see them all now. Everyone who's ever been here, thousands of years of human presence, all existing simultaneously in the space between moments, and they can see us too. They've been waiting for someone who could perceive them, someone who could witness what they've been trying to show for centuries. I asked him if he was injured, if he'd hit his head, if he needed medical attention. I was running through the protocols for dealing with someone experiencing a mental health crisis, trying to keep my voice calm and professional, even though every instinct was screaming at me that we needed to get out of this amphitheater immediately. He smiled, and it was the worst smile I'd ever seen, too wide, stretching his face in ways that human faces shouldn't stretch. "I'm not injured," he said. "I'm transcending. They're showing me how time really works in this place. The canyon isn't just old rocks stacked up. It's a recording device, a library. Every layer of stone holds the memory of the era when it was laid down. 2 billion years of history, all present, all accessible if you know how to look. And the people who came before, the ones who were here before any tribe we have records of, they figured out how to read those layers. They figured out how to move through them. And they left something behind, a key, a way in, for anyone who could find it and understand what they were seeing." The cliff wall behind him began to glow. That same red-orange pulse I'd seen in reports from other rangers in other locations, but more intense, more rhythmic, matching the frequency of the humming that filled the air. I could see shapes in the glow now, not random patterns, but figures, tall and thin with proportions that were almost human but not quite, watching us from inside the rock, or from behind the rock, or from some space that existed in parallel to the rock. Michael raised his arms, spreading them wide like he was embracing something. "They want me to join them," he said. "They want me to become part of the recording, part of the library. I'll exist in all times simultaneously. I'll see everything the canyon has seen. I'll know everything it knows. Not death, transcendence, evolution. Becoming something more than human. Becoming a keeper of the records, a guardian of the memories. Will you join me, Ranger? Will you see what I'm seeing? Will you become part of the eternal present?" I should have grabbed him and forced him to come with me back to the trail. I should have called for backup on my malfunctioning radio. I should have done something, anything, to prevent what happened next. But I was frozen, watching the cliff wall flow and pulse and reveal images of things that shouldn't exist, watching Michael Chen's body begin to change in ways that violated every law of physics and biology I understood. And then the shapes in the rock stepped through, not emerged from or appeared in front of, but stepped through the solid stone like it was a doorway. Like the cliff face was just a membrane between their space and ours. They were tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet, and thin in a way that didn't look emaciated, but rather elegantly elongated, like their proportions followed different geometric rules than human bodies. They were wearing things that might have been clothes, or might have been part of their bodies, flowing coverings that looked like they were made from the same substance as the rock, constantly shifting patterns in reds and oranges and creams. And their faces, what I could see of their faces, were human-like, but simplified, stylized, like living versions of the pictographs I'd seen on canyon walls throughout the park. They surrounded Michael, moving in a circle around him, and he rose off the ground. Not jumping, not climbing on anything, just rising, floating up about 3 feet, until he was suspended in the air, with his arms still spread, and his head tilted back, and his eyes reflecting that red-orange glow. One of the figures turned to look at me, and I heard a voice in my head, not through my ears, but directly in my mind, speaking without sound, but with perfect clarity. "You are a guardian," the voice said, "one who protects this place. We have been guardians here for much longer than your species has existed. We protect the memories. We maintain the recordings. We ensure that what has been is not lost. This one came to us willingly. He sought the old knowledge. He wanted to see beyond the present moment. We are granting his wish. He will become one of us, a keeper of the canyon's memories, existing in all time simultaneously, witnessing all that has been and all that will be in this sacred place. You may choose to join us. You have the sight. You can perceive what others cannot. You would make a strong keeper, or you may choose to leave and return to your linear existence. But you must choose, and you must remember. You must carry the knowledge of what exists here back to your world. You must be our witness." I wanted to say no. I wanted to run back up the trail to the rim and request immediate reassignment to any park that wasn't the Grand Canyon, but I couldn't move. The figures surrounded me now, and I could feel something happening, some change in my perception. Like layers of reality were becoming visible that I'd never been able to see before. I could see the amphitheater as it existed now, but I could also see it as it had existed 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, all the way back to when the Colorado River first carved this section of canyon. I could see the people who had stood in this exact spot throughout history: indigenous peoples and Spanish explorers and American settlers and modern tourists, all of them existing simultaneously in the space between moments. And I could see the keepers, the tall, thin figures who had been here longer than any human, maintaining their vigil, preserving the memories, keeping the records. I understood what they were offering: the ability to see all of time in this place, the knowledge of everything the canyon had witnessed, but also the loss of linear existence, of having a present separate from past and future, of being a person moving forward through time instead of a consciousness existing in all moments simultaneously. "No," I said, and my voice came out as barely a whisper, but it was enough. "I can't. I have a daughter. She's 12 years old. She needs me to come home. I can't exist in all times. I can only exist in the present, in my present. But I'll remember. I'll carry the knowledge. I'll be your witness. I'll protect this place. I'll keep people away from areas where the boundaries are thin. I'll maintain the respect that your kind deserves. Just let me go back. Please." The figures watched me for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then they nodded, or something like nodding, a gesture of acknowledgement. Michael Chen's body completed whatever transformation was happening. The red-orange glow faded from his eyes, replaced by a deep black that looked like it went on forever, like his eyes had become doorways into some vast space beyond normal reality. His proportions had changed subtly, his limbs slightly longer, his torso slightly thinner, his face slightly more stylized. He looked at me one last time, with those infinite black eyes, and I saw understanding there, and peace, and something that might have been gratitude. Then he and the tall figures began to fade, not walking away, but simply becoming less solid, less present, until they were gone completely, and I was standing alone in the amphitheater with the afternoon sun breaking through the blue twilight that had covered everything. Normal light returning, normal shadows falling at normal angles. My radio crackled to life, Dispatch asking for my position and status. My GPS was working again, showing only my actual location, no ghost markers. My compass pointed steadily north. Everything was normal. Everything except me. I radioed that I had reached Michael Chen's last known coordinates, but there was no sign of him, that I was beginning a search pattern and would update in 30 minutes. I spent 3 hours searching the Dragon Corridor and the surrounding terrain. The backup rangers joined me. We had a helicopter with thermal imaging flying overhead. We found nothing. No footprints beyond the ones I had made walking in. No gear, no body. No evidence that anyone named Michael Chen had ever been in that amphitheater. The official report states that he is a missing person, presumed to have fallen into an unmapped side canyon, or perhaps to have attempted an unwise solo climb and fallen to his death. His sister flew to Arizona 2 weeks later. I met with her to express my condolences and to assure her that we had done everything possible to find her brother. She looked at me with eyes that were too knowing, too aware, and said, "He told me once that if he ever disappeared in the Grand Canyon, it wouldn't be an accident. He said he was looking for something the old ones left behind. Did he find it, Ranger? Did he find what he was looking for?" I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't explain that her brother had become something beyond human, that he existed now in all times simultaneously as a keeper of the canyon's memories. So I said what I was supposed to say, that we were still searching, that we held out hope, that sometimes people get found weeks or months after they go missing in the backcountry. She nodded and thanked me and left. I never saw her again. But 3 weeks later, I received a package at the ranger station with no return address. Inside was a USB drive with a note that said, "He wanted you to see this." On the drive was video footage from Michael Chen's phone, the last video he had recorded before activating his emergency beacon. The footage showed the cliff wall in the amphitheater, showed it flowing and changing, and revealing the images I had seen, showed the tall, thin figures stepping through the rock, showed Michael's face as he watched them approach, and the expression on his face was joy. Pure, unrestrained joy. He had found what he was looking for. He had been chosen. I made a copy of the footage and buried the original drive in 3 feet of concrete at the bottom of a foundation I was pouring at my house. I don't know why I kept the copy. Insurance, maybe. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I did research after that day. I had to understand what I'd become part of. I found anthropological records from the 1930s. Interviews with Hopi elders discussing the Sipapu, the place of emergence, the boundary between the underworld and this world. The elders described it as a location in the Grand Canyon, where time behaved differently, where the ancestors could still be seen if you knew how to look, where certain people could cross between worlds if they were called. I found accounts from Spanish explorers in the 1540s describing a canyon where their compasses wouldn't work and where they saw spirits of great height watching them from the cliffs. I found records from the U.S. Geological Survey expeditions in the 1880s documenting strange magnetic anomalies in certain side canyons, areas where their instruments would malfunction, and where team members reported feeling watched by unseen presences. And I found something else. A classified report from a National Park Service internal investigation in 1976, documenting a series of disappearances in the Dragon Corridor area over a 10-year period. 8 people, all experienced hikers, all disappearing without a trace in the same general area where, Michael Chen had vanished. The report concluded that the area should be designated as high-risk terrain and that rangers should be trained to discourage visitors from entering it. But the report was never made public. The area was never officially closed, and the disappearances were never explained. I spoke to a Hopi elder about 6 months after my encounter in the amphitheater. He was in his 80s, a man who had spent his entire life learning the traditional knowledge of his people, keeping stories that most of the world had forgotten or never knew. He listened to my account without interrupting, without showing surprise or disbelief. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, looking out at the canyon from the viewpoint where we had met, watching the play of light and shadow on the layers of rock. Then he spoke in Hopi, translated his words into English for me. "The canyon is older than you can imagine," he said, "older than the stones themselves. It existed before it was carved, as a place in the spiritual geography of the world. When the physical canyon formed, it simply manifested what had always been there. A boundary place, a recording place, a place where time is not what you think it is. The keepers you saw, my people, have known them for as long as we have been in this land. We call them the Tsa'hil, the watchers, the ones who remember. They are not gods. They are not spirits exactly. They are something else, something that exists in the spaces between moments, maintaining the memories of all that has been. They take people sometimes, people who are called, people who seek them out, people whose consciousness is ready to transcend linear time. They don't take everyone. Most people walk through the canyon and never see them, never feel their presence. But those who can see, those who can perceive the boundaries, they get chosen. Or they choose themselves, and they become keepers too, guardians of the memories, witnesses to all of time in this sacred place. I asked him if I had been marked somehow, if the keepers had changed me. He studied my face carefully, and I saw recognition in his eyes. "You have the look," he said. "The look of someone who has seen beyond the present moment. You can perceive things now that you couldn't perceive before. You will notice when the boundaries are thin. You will feel when something is trying to cross from one time to another. You are a bridge walker now, one who stands between the world of linear time and the world of eternal present. It is a burden, but it is also a gift. You can protect people. You can keep them away from places where they might be taken if they're not ready. You can honor the keepers and the work they do. Not everyone who has this ability uses it well, but I think you will. I think you understand the responsibility." The mark appeared about 2 weeks after my conversation with the elder. I was changing after a shower and noticed a discoloration on my right forearm, a pattern I'd never seen before. It looked like a tattoo, but I'd never gotten a tattoo, and it definitely hadn't been there the day before. The pattern was geometric, spiraling lines and angular shapes that formed an image that looked like a map or like directions to somewhere. I recognized the style. It was the same style as the symbols I'd seen on the cliff walls in the amphitheater. The same style as the patterns that had appeared on the flowing rock. I touched it and felt a strange warmth, not uncomfortable, but definitely noticeable, like the mark was slightly warmer than the rest of my skin. I've met 4 other people with the mark since then. One is a park ranger at Yellowstone. One is a BLM ranger in Utah. One is a backcountry guide who works in the Superstition Mountains. One is an archaeologist who studies ancient Pueblo ruins in New Mexico. We all have stories. We all have encounters we can't explain through normal means. We all carry the knowledge of the boundary places, the thin places, the locations where time behaves differently, and where something ancient watches and remembers. We don't talk about it openly. We can't. But we recognize each other. We know the look in each other's eyes, the weight of witnessing, the burden of knowing. I requested a transfer to the North Rim 8 months ago. The request was approved, which surprised me because usually the Park Service wants to keep experienced rangers at the busy South Rim locations. But my supervisor, a woman who's been with the Park Service for 30 years, looked at me when she approved the transfer and said, "Sometimes a change of location is necessary for mental health and professional effectiveness. The North Rim needs someone with your skills, someone who understands that there's more to ranger work than visitor management and search and rescue. Someone who can recognize when something is beyond our normal jurisdiction." I think she knows. I think there's a network of people within the Park Service who understand what exists in these places, who work to manage situations that don't fit into normal protocols, who identify rangers and officers who can perceive the boundaries and who quietly move them to locations where they're needed. I don't have proof. I probably never will. But I've noticed patterns. Rangers who report unusual incidents never face disciplinary action. Reports about impossible events get filed and forgotten. Transfer requests from certain areas get approved or denied based on criteria that have nothing to do with the official justifications. I'm recording this because I made a promise in that amphitheater. I promised to be a witness. I promised to carry the knowledge back to the world of linear time. This is me keeping that promise. This is me telling you that there are places in the Grand Canyon where the boundaries are thin. Places where the keepers watch and remember. Places where people who seek the old knowledge can find it, but at the cost of their linear existence. If you visit the Grand Canyon, respect the boundaries. Stay on the established trails. Don't wander into unmarked side canyons because you think you see something interesting or because you feel called to explore. The Dragon Corridor is real. The keepers are real. The choice they offer is real. And it's permanent. If you ever find yourself in the Grand Canyon backcountry and you notice that the light is wrong, that shadows are falling at impossible angles, that your compass is spinning, and your GPS is showing ghost locations, turn around. Go back to the rim. Don't investigate. Don't try to document what you're seeing. The canyon remembers everyone who enters it. The keepers know everyone who walks through their territory. And they're always looking for people who can perceive them. People whose consciousness is ready to transcend. People who are willing to sacrifice their individual present for eternal existence in all moments. Most people aren't ready for that choice. Most people shouldn't make that choice. But some are called. Some seek it out. And for them, the keepers wait patiently in the spaces between moments, maintaining their vigil, preserving the memories, keeping the records of everything this ancient place has witnessed. I'll be at the North Rim for the foreseeable future. I'll be patrolling the trails and the overlooks. I'll be watching for people who have the look, who can perceive the boundaries, who might wander into places where they'll be given a choice they're not prepared to make. I'll be maintaining the respect that the keepers deserve. I'll be protecting the visitors who don't understand what they're looking at when they stare into the immensity of the canyon. That's my purpose now. That's the price I pay for being allowed to leave that amphitheater, for choosing my daughter and linear time over transcendence and eternal present. The canyon remembers everything. The keepers are always watching. And now, so am I. My name is Ranger Cassandra Torres, National Park Service, Grand Canyon National Park, North Rim District, Boundary Walker, Keeper of the Knowledge, Witness to the Eternal Present. Welcome to the Grand Canyon. The rocks remember everything. The keepers are watching. And somewhere, in the spaces between moments, in a side canyon that doesn't appear on any map, something ancient is waiting for the next person who seeks what the old ones left behind.